talks at his rallies about fictional characters. He constantly is in a state of grievance about himself. He has no plans for the American people. And then he just makes things up on a full-time basis with the intention to make the people afraid, to make people fear that which they should not be afraid of. But he does it in a way that he thinks, I think, will compel them to believe that somehow he is the savior, when in fact he is quite unfit to do the job.
That's Vice President Kamala Harris speaking with reporters on Saturday with a theme that she carried throughout the weekend. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It's Monday, October the 14th, and with us we have the host of Way Too Early, White House Bureau Chief at Politico, Jonathan Lemire. Also, we have U.S. Special Correspondent for BBC News, Katty Kay. So much going on in the news today. Katty, why don't you get us started in North Carolina?
Yeah, Joe, I mean, it's been a super busy weekend out on the campaign trail. And we're now, just 3 weeks until Election Day, pretty much. Yesterday, Vice President Kamala Harris held a rally in Greenville, North Carolina, where she called Donald Trump weak for refusing to do the things that every other presidential candidate typically does, including herself.
He has no plan for how he would address the needs of the American people. He is only focused on himself. And he's not, but here's the thing, North Carolina, and he's not being transparent with the voters. He's not being transparent. So check this out. He refuses to release his medical records. I've done it. Every other presidential candidate in modern era has done it. He is unwilling to do a 60 Minutes interview. Like every other major party candidate has done for more than half a century. He is unwilling to meet for a second debate. And here's the thing, it makes you wonder, why does his staff want him to hide away? One must question, are they afraid that people will see that he is too weak and unstable to lead America? Is that what's going on? We can already see the harm he's up to as a candidate. Most recently, spreading disinformation in the wake of natural disasters. Blocking real solutions that would stop drug cartels from crossing the border when he tried to kill and did that border security deal. Because you see, Donald Trump cares more about scaring people, creating fear, running on a problem, instead of what real leaders do, which is to participate in fixing problems.
All right. We've got a tie race. We're going to get to that in a minute. NBC News poll came out yesterday, 48-48. And so what we're looking at, I think, Jonathan Lemire with Kamala Harris in North Carolina there, is the beginning of a 3-week dash. I mean, we're talking about the beginning of I think her closing message. And if you look at it, it's a pretty strong message. Saying that he's afraid to release his medical records. He's afraid to go and do a 60 Minutes interview. He's afraid to do a debate. And then she comes behind and she goes to what Donald Trump's political sort of strength is, which is strength, power. And she says he's weak and unstable, which does seem to sort of pick at what a lot of people who even have supported Donald Trump say, going, I don't like him. Not sure if he's all there, but I may vote for him anyway. I'm curious, is this a deliberate effort by the Harris campaign to drive this message home that he's weak, he's unstable, and they're afraid to even put him out there?
Yes, and part of this is a hope to provoke him. And she has been effective at needling him, finding his little sore, weak spots. One of which, let's remember the debate, that sort of almost seemed like a throwaway line, although we've since been told it was well practiced, where she noted that people leave Trump's rallies early. Donald Trump, I don't think, has given a speech in the month since, in which he has not tried to rebut that. He talks about it constantly, about people leave. They don't leave early. They don't leave my speeches early. They don't leave my speeches early. And that was a sign to people in the Harris campaign that she can effectively needle him, put him on the territory where she wants to compete. And she's doing it again here now, trying to turn one of his strengths, much like his crowds, his suggestion of his strength, and turn it into a weakness, have him defend it, sort of undercut it, say, look, actually, he's afraid to do an interview. He's afraid to release his medical records. And tying that with their overall theme, which is simply Trump makes every decision about himself, not about you, the voter. He's shielding you. He doesn't want to give you this information. He doesn't trust you. He's not looking out for you. And that is her argument right now as Trump simply goes darker and darker on the campaign trail.
Well, and he does do that, and we're going to get to that in 1 second, Katie. There's also sort of this frustration inside the Harris campaign that nothing matters. It seems when it comes to Donald Trump that he doesn't release his medical records. Every other presidential candidate does. And there's really not even that much of a fuss about it. That he doesn't do the 60 Minutes interview, the first time in 50 years that a presidential candidate doesn't do the 60 Minutes interview. He ducks that. Then he says that CBS should be arrested. People at CBS should be arrested for 60 Minutes editing an interview the way 60 Minutes always edits interviews. And then, of course, refuses to do the second debate, even if it's at Fox News. And so it does seem that he is hiding. And so she drives it home with, it's like they're afraid that he is too weak and he's too unstable to do his job, to go out there. How does that work with undecided voters, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the Kamala Harris we saw in North Carolina this weekend is the Kamala Harris that both the campaign and Democratic strategists that I speak to say that they want out there. That's the person they want voters to see, who's projecting strength, who's reminding people about the weaknesses and the chaos surrounding Donald Trump. But I agree with you, Joe. I mean, it's remarkable that here we are 3 weeks out and almost nothing seems to move the needle, and perhaps not very much has moved the needle ever since Donald Trump's was that first assassination attempt against him, and even then it didn't seem to move the needle very much. So the Harris campaign just has to keep getting out there for 3 weeks and hope that incrementally, sliver by sliver, you can pick away at some sections of the electorate, and hope that that is going to be what swings those, what are we now seeing? 4% of people who say they still haven't made their minds up.
Who hasn't made their mind up yet? It is crazy. And again, we're going to be talking to Mark Murray in a second about this tied race. I will say, though, I thought that was one of Harris's better performances in some time. It sort of harkens back to the early rallies right after she got in, and you were seeing the sold-out crowds in Arizona and Nevada and in North Carolina, all over the place. But last night, that speech showed the energy I think a lot of people saw when she first launched her campaign. And if this is their strategy to end strongly this way, and continuing to ask the question, what's he afraid of? Why is he afraid to debate me? Why is he afraid to do what every other presidential candidate's done over the past 50 years and go on CBS? What is wrong with him physically or mentally? Why won't he release his medical records? And the way she was delivering it, positive, and I think joyful, but also aggressively. I think that's the tact she needs. Joyful and yet defiant. And I keep saying joyful because campaigns are about contrast. You see that? You see that picture right there? Kamala Harris, joyful. That is a contrast to an increasingly dark campaign. And if you ask Donald Trump, he would tell you, yeah, I'm running an increasingly dark campaign. That is his intent. He thinks fear, he thinks loathing, he thinks darkness wins. How do you combat that? You combat it, again, with being defiant, but being joyful. And She seemed to strike that tone last night very well.